Hello, today's learning target is to multiply and divide rational expressions, and I'm going to divide the lesson into multiplication and division. But before we start that, I'm going to give you a quick warm-up just to remind you of the basic skills that we're using in this lesson. So go ahead and pause the video, complete those those 4 questions, and then come back and check your work. So hopefully in doing these warm-up problems you remembered that cross-reducing before you multiply the numerators and multiply the denominators helps make sure that your final answer is fully simplified. And it's not a big deal if you don't cross-reduce first because then you can reduce at the end. And I also hope that you remember when you're dividing fractions that you first have to make it into a multiplication problem where you're changing it to multiplication and then changing the second term into its reciprocal. And it's really not called a term. I just messed that up because terms are added and subtracted. So using those basic ideas, we're now going to multiply rational expressions. So even when I have variables involved, I can cross-cancel those. So I'm going to start this problem by canceling my x cubed and my x cubed. Then I can also cancel my 4 and my 2. And then I don't see anything else that I can cancel, so this is going to end up being 10 over x plus 1. And I just want to double check and make sure that there's nothing else I can do on that one. So this is pretty straightforward, just pointing out to you that you can cancel variables even when you have more complicated problems. On this next one, we actually have to do a little bit of work before we can start to cancel. So our first step on these more complicated problems is to factor. So I'm going to actually rewrite this problem up here with the second factor being factored. So this is going to be h plus 3 times h plus 2. And then it's all going to be over h squared. So then I can do some cross-canceling. So I've got h plus 2 as a term, not as a term, h plus 2 as a factor, and h plus 2 as a factor, so they can be canceled. I can cross-cancel here. I've got h and then this h, and I'm going to be left with h plus 3 all over h. And I cannot cancel these h's because this h is being added to 3. It is not a factor. So just to summarize what we've just done there, our first steps on these problems are, the first step is to factor, the second step is to cross-reduce, the third step is to multiply the numerators and the denominators, and the fourth step is to check for simplifying, but you won't be able to do that if you did number 2 correctly. So if you cross-reduced, you won't have anything further to simplify at the end. So I'm going to give you a couple practice problems to do now. So go ahead and pause the video, and then when you come back, there will be answers here. So as you look at these answers and look at my work, you might notice in the first problem that I didn't cross-reduce all the way, so I ended up with 24 and 4. So if you get to an answer and you recognize that you have a common factor, you can just go ahead and reduce it at that point. So the answer to the first one was 6y over y minus 5. The answer to the second one, it reduced to 1 over x minus 5. So part 2 of this lesson is dividing rational expressions, which if you remember to multiply by the reciprocal is really not any more difficult than multiplying. So on this first problem, I'm going to change it to 8 over w minus 4 times w minus 4 over w, because these are being multiplied factors, so I can cancel the whole thing and cancel the whole thing, and I end up with 8 over w. On this second one, I am going to need to go ahead and factor first, so I'm going to have p minus 3 times p plus 2 all over p plus 1, and then I'm going to multiply times 1, so I'm multiplying by the reciprocal, over p minus 2, p plus 2. So hopefully your factoring skills are still strong, because you'll need them in the work that we're doing both today and tomorrow, and I believe the next day. So I factored, remember this is the difference of two squares, so the pattern for the difference of two squares is that I have a binomial with a minus and then a binomial with a plus. The minus and the plus made the middle term go away, and then the minus 2 times the positive 2 is the minus 4. So once I have both of those factors then factored, then I can start cross-reducing. It does not look like I can do anything else for cross-reducing. Maybe once I write it down I'll see something else. This is going to be p plus 1 times p minus 2. So on this one, some of you might be tempted to then expand this back out into a trinomial, which would be okay, but you really don't have to. If you leave it in this form with these factors, then it is clear that you can't reduce any further, whereas if you expanded this out, you would have to factor it again just to make sure that you couldn't reduce. So I would leave it in this form. So to summarize the second part of this lesson, first we're going to factor. Second, we're going to change to a multiplication problem by multiplying by the reciprocal. Third, we're going to cross-reduce. 4, we're going to multiply the numerators and the denominators. And then finally, we're going to check for simplifying, which hopefully won't be necessary if we did, this should be number 3 correctly. All right, here's some practice problems for you, and when you're done with them, you can restart the video and there will be answers here. All right, so those are finishing up the lesson for the day. So if you have any questions about any of these practice problems, let me know. Otherwise, you are ready for your assignment, which is linked to the slide. I gave you a paper assignment instead of a clever assignment so that if you need to look at work that I did, you can see the work that I did. I'm not going to ask you to upload it today, but probably Friday, maybe Monday, I'm going to have you demonstrate all of this work to me. So I would tell you that it's each lesson this week gets progressively more difficult. So I would say don't get behind. Make sure that you're checking your work and you're asking me questions if you have any. Okay, thanks.